So we're going to be talking about Wi-Fi, how it works and how it can be done better and how can we all help in this. But I would like to take half a minute before that because in every GRNOG I see Andreas has some wonderful statistics about GRNOG. So I took some time to find some of my own, and I have looked in the past how many talks we had about Wi-Fi to kind of figure out if it's a topic that's of interest to you. I know you can vote later, but the answer is half a talk. So we had a talk about the refugee Wi-Fi, which was a wonderful action by GRNet, but I couldn't find the slides or the video. I assume it was not a technical talk. And also, since it's important to keep track of our KPIs, here is a chart. In the x-axis you can see the GRNOGs, and in the y-axis the talks about Wi-Fi. So do let me know in the vote if that's something of interest to you. Okay, so now let's begin with how Wi-Fi works. Basically, Wi-Fi is the primary way of access in today's networks. Most devices, laptops, mobile phones connect over Wi-Fi to the internet. Wi-Fi, for access at least, is split into two main frequency bands because it's a wireless standard. You transmit things, you have to do it on a frequency range, and we have currently two main ranges, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and we also have 60, but this is not used for access yet. And each band has some standards. We have BG and N in 2.4 and N and AC in 5 gigahertz, which is the newest standard. And recently we also added AX, which is an even faster standard that also is backwards compatible with 2.4 gigahertz that is being heavily utilized right now. So one of the characteristics of each protocol is the transmission rate. So for example, in 802.11b we have speeds rating from 1 megabit per second to 11, and this is not variable, so you have like 1, 2.5, I think 5 and then 11. You don't have anything between 1 and 11. So if someone only supports B, they have to transmit at either one of those rates. If they're close to the access point, they can transmit at 11 megabits. If they're far away, they can do 1 megabit per second. This is the physical rate. So 2.4 gigahertz is basically split into many channels. We're going to be looking at this band since this is the oldest and the most utilized today. It has 12 channels from 1 to 13, and it is in some odd numbering. This is in Europe. In the US, there are other, channel 13 is not available, for example. And you can compare this to FM radio. So when you're on your car and you tune into a radio station, they also have frequencies like 90.0, 0.1, 0.2, etc. The same stands for Wi-Fi channels. One characteristic of wireless transmission is that in a single area, only a single device can transmit in the same frequency. So in a radio station, you cannot have two radio stations in the same frequency. Same with Wi-Fi, only one device may be transmitting at a time. Now you will say we have 13 channels, they are more than enough. However, there is a problem here, and it is that the channels, when they were originally designed, they were overlapping. That means that essentially we only have 3 channels. We have 1, 6, and 11. So 2.4 gigahertz, only 3 devices at the same time can transmit. Right now we have over 100 people here, and you also have, some of you have laptops, and there are access points, people outside. We have more than 200 devices here, and only 3 can transmit at the same time. You cannot have more than 3 devices transmitting, which leads to congestion issues. So in order to get a better understanding of how a channel is utilized, I have taken channel 1, for example, here. Let's say that we take this channel and a time duration. So this is 1 second here, but this usually happens much faster, 100 milliseconds or something like that. So let's see what is being transmitted by Wi-Fi. The first thing that you may come here and see is that there are some Wi-Fi networks here. Let's say there are 5 Wi-Fi networks in channel 1 right now. How does your phone know these networks are available? The access points transmit, let's say every 1 second, now a message that says that this access point is available with this name. And the problem is that in order for everyone to understand this message and be able to decipher it, it has to be done at the slowest possible speed. So if the Wi-Fi access point supports 802.11b, it has to be transmitted at 1 megabit per second. It doesn't matter if the person is near the access point and can do gigabit, it has to be transmitted at a megabit per second. So if we have 5 access points, 5 SSIDs, if we have 2 access points per SSID, this doubles. So if we have 5 SSIDs, we have a lot of beacons that are being transmitted. If you have 10 SSIDs, up to 32% of the channel may be utilized. So if you have 10 Wi-Fi networks on the same channel, no traffic, no connected devices at all, a third of the channel is used. Nobody can transmit for at least a third of the time. And this is a huge problem, obviously. Now you also have client traffic as well. Again, this depends on the rate. Now, if you have someone downloading a 5 megabyte file and they are near the access point, they can do it pretty fast. They can download 5 megabytes in a few milliseconds, while someone that is far, far away and only does 1 megabit at 802.11b, they have to download, they take about the same time for 25 kilobytes. I think that's 200 times the more data in about the same time. So if you have a device that is far away, it takes a lot more time, a lot more air time, a lot of more spectrum to transmit the same amount of data as someone who's nearby. So if GRNOG finishes and we all live and we're connected to the Wi-Fi and we are far away, connected at 1 megabit per second, even sending a SYN packet can take a huge amount of time, and it can render the Wi-Fi useless. It can basically destroy performance for everyone at the cost of having half a megabit at best of available bandwidth while we're far away, and we may not even do something. We may just be walking away from the building. So as you can see, that's a large problem that exists with Wi-Fi, and this is how efficiently can you use the time, because you only have 1 second per second. You cannot have more than that. So it's up to us on how we best effectively use that. Now, what can we do to improve this? I think that there is one solution that everyone should try and do, and this is disable 802.11b. It is a standard from 2000, if I remember correctly. So it's 20 years old. And currently, I do not think it's still needed, it's still relevant. And that is because 3 years later, G, the next standard, which is much faster, came along. So I think if you have any devices that are between 2000 and 2003 still working, maybe you should keep it, but most of us do not even have devices older than 2010 or something. So as you can see here, in this case, all the beacons are cut in almost half. So you take half the time to transmit the same amount of information. And if you also do it at a faster data rate, if you support 10 megabits or above, then you cut this airtime utilization to a tenth. So instead of needing 1 second, now you need 100 milliseconds for the same amount of information. You will lose some range because devices further away may not be able to utilize, they may not be able to tell the signal from the noise of the environment. But even if you're connected at 1 megabit, the experience is terrible anyways, so I think it's a sacrifice worth having. So another benefit that we get from disabling B is that currently we can only use 3 channels, 1, 6, and 11, and this is because the modulation of B has this kind of semi-circular shape. Modulations in G, N, and stuff like that, they use OFDM. O stands for orthogonal, so they do not use the same amount of, they do not use the same amount of, they do not have the same frequency width. So in Europe, that we also have channel 13, we can also have 4 channels for 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. This is an extra channel that is very precious in a band that is congested. So by disabling B, we can then just use channels 1, 5, 9, and 13 from now on. We do not have to, we have an extra channel that will be very helpful. In general, this is let's say a general rule of thumb on what makes Wi-Fi transmission layer 2 access fast and good to your neighbors or not. The first one is low power, because if you do not transmit far away and if you do not receive from far away, you get less interference. If I have an access point here and another one 10 meters away, if I have them on full power, they interfere with each other and cause problems for both. They destroy performance for both. But if they have low power and they're not within range, then it is much, much better. The other thing that everyone should be doing is disabling B and setting data rates to something above 12 megabits. This basically you can control on your access point which rates should be supported. So you can say I want to support rates from 12 megabits or above. And again, some devices before 2003 may not work, but you may not have them, so it's something that you can do. Another thing is also minimize SSIDs. Each SSID takes a valuable portion of airtime. It takes precious milliseconds. So the less you have, the better it is for everyone in that area. This does not only slow down your network, but everyone else is in the same area. So it causes problems for everyone. If you have multiple roles, like Panagiotis said before, with 50 departments and 50 VLANs, just use radius assigned VLANs and have one SSID. I've seen places that have 10 SSIDs, one for every department, and basically they use a third of the channel just for that. And of course, you should add more access points, because you decrease the range. It's only fair to add more access points to have this coverage. Thankfully, they are pretty cheap, so it's not something that cannot be done. Then you have, you should use these channels 1, 5, 9, and 13. Basically, you get an extra channel. Everyone gets an extra channel, not just you. And do not go above 20 megahertz of width. Do not go for large channels like 80 megahertz or 160, because they take up the entire spectrum. And then you collide, you have interference from every other Wi-Fi in your area, not just on the same channel as you. And you do not get any speed benefits. So a shorter channel may actually be faster than a 40 megahertz or an 80 megahertz one. So much like the previous talk I did, I also wanted to have a look at what what's the current situation in Greece. So I had to do some measurements for that to see what's the current state. And that measurement basically was go and walk around and collect these beacons, these transmissions from access points, and create a map of the access points, which rates they support, which protocols, their encryption type, all that, and collect all this data and analyze it. So in the first version of this experiment, I went with a friend, and he has a black Mercedes. So we had a few antennas on top and one hanging from the passenger window, and we were driving around with the tinted windows, and we were collecting Wi-Fi networks. And there was also, at the same time, there was in a square, there was a talk by someone. So there was heavy police presence, and there was also a black Mercedes driving around with a few antennas on top. But driving is not good for the environment, so the next version of it was a backpack with a laptop inside and a few antennas sticking on top. This allowed us to get to many more places that we could not drive there, and also walk slower so we get better results. But I then looked at how technology progresses, and the future really is not laptops. So the next best thing that there is Internet of Things. So it turns out that there is this device. It's an ESP8266 or an ESP32. It's essentially a tiny microcontroller that also has Wi-Fi and costs €2 or something like that. And you can also add a micro SD there. So the next trend we came up with was wearables, smart clothes, and we started walking around with antennas and power banks hanging from our pockets and cable and stuff like that. It was a little bit weird, but not many people noticed. Also, who said research cannot be good for your health? We did this in a week, and according to my phone, we walked about 70 kilometers in 1 week, performing measurements. Maybe because I've gained some weight, I have to repeat this measurement at some point. It certainly helps. So let's see some results now. I have SITA and Vodafone separately because there was a lot of access points that were using the SITA SSID and they were not in the Vodafone SSID yet. So here you can see some of the channels. They use 1, 6, and 11, which is pretty common for 2.4 gigahertz. Now I should say that this equipment did not support 5 gigahertz, so it's only on 2.4. So by walking around, SITA has a pretty even distribution, and some people in between that probably change their channel manually or something like that. And by looking at which rates they support, the vast majority also supports G and N. So there was a 15% that did not have the newer standard N. By newer, I mean, I think over 10 years old by now. So this means that the CPEs are probably a little older, and I guess that's why their SSID was not changed. And then we have OTE. They have mainly presence on 1 and 11. They do not utilize 6 that much. I do not know why, but there is still significant presence. But for some reason, 6 is not used as much there. I do not know why. If you do, come find me. And there they have newer CPEs apparently, because the old ones that do not support N are a very tiny 2%. Then we have Vodafone. I do not really know what's happening there. I mean, they have 1 and 11, which is normal, but they also have 5 and 6. So I'm not sure why this was appeared in this measurement. And this also includes whole HOL SSIDs, so this is also included, which is legacy CPEs. And same as OTE, very few old devices probably, at least older than 2007, 2008 or something like that. And we also had, I think it was 1 or 2 networks there that had be disabled. So we already have our first 2 networks that follow these best practices. We have a few left, but I trust that you will help with that. We then had the wind, which experienced a similar behavior as the others, mainly 1 and 11 and a few on channel 6. I do not know why that happens. Based on other measurements, there was presence on 6, so it's probably not something faulty with the methodology, but I'm not sure. I will have to verify that. And we also had 2 more SSIDs here with B disabled, so we are already at 4 networks that were measured. The sample may not be the best because it was done in a single city. Maybe here in Athens there's maybe better deployments because there are more companies and stuff like that, but I don't really know. So that's as far as wind is concerned, and then we have everyone else. We have a pretty a distribution that we expected, 1, 6, and 11 for others. And here, people with custom access points and all this stuff, they actually try and do some things, change their wireless settings. And we have people using just N, or we also have G and N. We have stuff like that that we didn't see before in the CPEs of the ISPs. So the most popular protocol is G, and the second one is unfortunately B. This blue bar here should ideally go to 0. This would be the ideal spectrum-wise, efficiency-wise for everyone. So some suggestions I have to ISPs, since I think they are attending usually GRNOG. It's to turn off by default at least 802.11b if that's possible, and switch to a new channel numbering if this is allowed by the vendors, of course. There are a lot of things that have to be done here, and I understand. And if someone calls and they have a problem and they require B because they have a super old device, you can use channel 1, which is common between the two anyways. And also maybe start shipping 5 gigahertz CPEs. I think only one does it. I do not know about the rest. Probably they have started, but I don't know. It's something that should be done because there are many more channels in the 5 gigahertz spectrum, but please use 20 megahertz width there. Do not go to 80 or 160 and take up all the available space. So I think that's it for today. Some future work, a sneak peek into future work. Of course not, because it's illegal, right? I would never do it. So I'm open for questions now.
Hi, is it open? Thanks for the great presentation.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank
Keep
you.
it up. You always run through serious danger for preparing your work that you present in GRNOG.
No.
The situation with Wi-Fi is certainly very complicated. It's really hard to have solutions that work in every case. Of course, I cannot do anything else but agree with your recommendations, with most of your recommendations. However, in order to bring an example of how things get complicated, you mentioned that instead of multiple SSIDs, which means multiple beacons which take up airtime, which in the past, certainly, especially in the past, it was a big issue for most chipsets and most vendors. More recently, the situation is a bit better. There are some optimizations that each vendor tries to do there. But in any case, the radius assigned VLAN is only an option for those doing 802.11x, of which there are not that many yet. There will certainly be more in the future. Jerome is such an example, of course, as you probably know. And the thing is that, as surprising as it may be, radius assigned VLANs, and this is the key topic here, doesn't really work very well in many Wi-Fi deployments. What it practically means is that you use the same SSID, so you begin with the same broadcast domain, but you actually change some parts of it. You change the group, the GTKs, and all that. So there's many vendors that you wouldn't expect to have such problem, like Cisco and Aruba, which cannot support deployments where you have a locally bridged, local switched, as they call it, SSID with radio assigned VLANs, because in that case you get multicast and broadcast traffic from different VLANs. The chipsets cannot differentiate, and they broadcast everything to all clients, no matter what the user session is assigned to.
I totally agree.
Even in 2020, it's a big problem.
Yeah, but I think I would not recommend going with this approach a few years ago, because it was certainly less mature. But now I think there are some fixes, and also, by the way, multicast over Wi-Fi is terrible because it's also done at the slowest possible rate of 1 megabit. So companies like Aruba, and I think Cisco does it too, they support a feature that translates a multicast to unicast. So this also helps. And this is not for everyone at home. If you have one SSID at home, it doesn't matter. This is because I've seen deployments having 10 SSIDs, one per every role, one for POS, one for sales, marketing, everything. So they just take up all the available channel. And because they also have multiple access points, they take up 30% of every available channel. I'm mainly talking about these companies. But
just to understand what the problem with multicast is that for IPv6, this issue means that you get root advertisements from all the networks every single VLAN. So, which most of them, of course, do not work for that user.
Yeah. Well, I did not.
This is usually not
yeah.
covered by multicast to unicast transmission.
Oh, yeah, correct. Yes.
Okay.
We have...
yeah.
Περισσότερο να προσθέσω κάτι σε αυτό που είπατε σχετικά με το WiFi και το assign τα VLAN από το radius, επειδή εμείς το υλοποιήσαμε. Η αλήθεια είναι ότι σε κάποια entry-level access point είχαμε πρόβλημα. Είχαμε πρόβλημα performance. Δηλαδή, από κάποιο σημείο και μετά, όταν ήταν πάνω από 15-20 συσκευές συνδεμένες πάνω στο access point, δεν άφηνε άλλες να συνδεθούν και είδαμε ότι είχε σηκώνα αρκετά ψηλά το utilization. Οπότε αναγκαστήκαμε να περάσουμε σε enterprise σειρές access point. Έτσι. Τώρα, παραδείγματα εξοπλισμού μπορώ να σας πω, αλλά εντάξει, νομίζω ότι έχει νόημα. Αυτό.
Λοιπόν, και μια τελευταία ερώτηση.
Γεια σου, Αντώνη. Άρης Δερμιάς. Υποθέτω ότι όλες οι μετρήσεις γίνανε στο Ηράκλειο, στην Κρήτη, έτσι.
Δεν θυμάμαι, δυστυχώς.
Άλλη μία ερώτηση. Δεδομένου του ότι... δεν θυμάμαι ακριβώς, αλλά νομίζω ότι το RIPE Atlas πλέον υποστηρίζει Wi-Fi measurement στις καινούργιες εκδόσεις.
Σωστά.
Υπήρχε η δυνατότητα να χρησιμοποιήσετε δεδομένα από εκεί, αντί να κάνεις το word driving που έκανες?
Σίγουρα δεν είχε τόση πλάκα. Και δεν έχασα τόσα κιλά. Αν δεν θα χάνα τόσα κιλά, δεν το έκανα. Αλλά ξέρω...
Καλό motivation.
Ναι, ακριβώς. Ξέρω ότι υπάρχει, αλλά δεν ξέρω κατά πόσο υπάρχουν αρκετά δεδομένα. Δεν ξέρω... Ναι, οκ. Φαντάζομαι, από όσο ήξερα, δεν υπάρχουν τόσα πολλά δεδομένα και τόσα πολλά probes τα οποία να το υποστηρίζουν. Οπότε το είχα σκεφτεί, το είχα δει, αλλά δεν χρησιμοποίησα δεδομένα από αυτό.
Και μία τελευταία ερώτηση. Μας έδειξες κάποια στατιστικά για configuration που γίνεται ουσιαστικά από providers. Τι γίνεται σε configuration που κάνει κάποιος μόνος του, δηλαδή σε SSIDs τα οποία δεν είναι SITA, OT, WIND κτλ.
Ναι. Εκεί είναι ακόμα πιο εύκολο, γιατί έχεις τον έλεγχο. Απλά το θέμα, περισσότερο είπα για τους providers, γιατί αν ο ΤΕ κάνει αύριο αυτή την αλλαγή, θα αλλάξει ένας τεράστιος αριθμός δικτύων σε όλη την Ελλάδα. Οπότε η αλλαγή θα είναι τεράστια. Ενώ το να το κάνει κάποιος από μόνος του σίγουρα βοηθάει πάρα πολύ, να το κάνει και σε άλλους να κάνει αυτή τη ρύθμιση. Απλά δεν μπορεί να έχει το ίδιο impact με το ίδιο effort που θα χρειαστεί. Τα ίδια πράγματα όμως ισχύουν για όλους. Δηλαδή, μπορείς να το κάνεις αυτό και στο σπίτι σου και θα βοηθήσει αρκετά. Κυρίως είναι τα data rates τα οποία θα πρέπει να απενεργοποιηθούν, τα χαμηλά data rates.
Ωραία. Υπάρχουν μια-δύο ερωτήσεις ακόμα, θα τις πάρουμε στο διάλειμμα. Αντώνη, ευχαριστούμε πολύ γιατί δεν έχουμε χρόνο. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ για την παρουσία σου.